Now that you've finished your task and you've submitted your report, let's have a look at an example of a report where the writer has written critically. Writing critically involves analysis and evaluation. Those two things are really important. Analysis means examining something in detail, whereas evaluation means that you make a personal choice based on your reasoning. And we're going to see examples of these two things in this report. Make sure that you don't confuse critical writing with description. When you are at university, you may well need to describe things, but the real purpose of writing at university is to encourage you to think for yourself and express your own ideas about the things that you've learnt, not just describe the way things are. Now, of necessity, the introduction to this report contains some description. The writer needs to repeat the instructions that they've been given to show that she's understood what she has to do. But have a look at this introduction. First of all, we've got the context for the report, that's in grey. Then we've got the explanation of the village play area and the requirements, that the play equipment must be accessible to all children, different ages, different physical abilities. Then we've got the aim of the report and the items of the report that need to go in there. Now, all of that is just description, and it's ensuring that the reader understands that the writer knows what the purpose of this report is. Let's move on now to the critical writing section of this report. Well, when you analyse, you pick out main characteristics. Now, the way that the writer's done this is to start off with the climbing frame and look at the characteristics and the benefits. We know the climbing frame's popular, we know it's good for developing strength and coordination, and we know that it provides children with the ability to test themselves, see how courageous they are, give themselves new challenges. So the writer has picked out some characteristics of the climbing frame that she feels are really important. So there you've got your analysis in red. We also find that the writer is showing characteristics of the climbing frame which are disadvantages. For example, children can't use the climbing frame without adults, and it's expensive. However, the writer then evaluates, the writer comes to a decision. Okay, we've got the characteristics, we know what the disadvantages are, but still in the evaluation we've got the reasoning that the writer would like to include this in the playground. If we move on to the next section, we're seeing an analysis of the sandpit and the playhouse. Now, it's really important that young children have somewhere to play. This is the writer's input about the analysis of what the play area is good for. And although the writer thinks that the sandpit and the playhouse would be very good for creative and free play, she comes to an evaluation that we should try and combine these two pieces of equipment to give the children maximum play benefit. So we know the characteristics that we're looking for from the sandpit and the playhouse, and we see the evaluation, we see the writer's decision and the reasoning behind that decision. Moving on now to the seesaw. We know that the seesaw has been rejected. We know that straight away, and we know the reason why it's been rejected, because only 2 people can use it at any one time. We then start to analyse the swing, and because the swing has the further characteristic of children finding swings fun and flexible, and they can be used by all ages, and they're cheap, through that analysis we know that the writer is going to ignore the limitations that the swing brings, the disadvantages, and going to recommend it over the seesaw. And in fact, the writer justifies why from the analysis why they're selecting 2 swings. They're quite cheap, and you can have them equipped for babies or infants and for older children. So the writer justifies that choice in that paragraph. Finally, we move on to the roundabout with wheelchair access. Here we've got the analysis again. The writer chooses to highlight the fact from the instructions that the play area must be inclusive. So if, in a sense, the writer is looking back and picking out one important point from the instructions to include. Now, this isn't description, this is analysis, because the writer is choosing to highlight that piece of information in this paragraph and using it to justify the equipment that she chooses, which is the roundabout with wheelchair access. Then we have analysis of the characteristics and the benefits of roundabouts and slides. This type of roundabout can be used for all sorts of children. They can play, cooperate, socialise, they can control the speed. And although the slide is good, it's not useful really for children with disabilities. So that piece of equipment has been rejected. But as an evaluation, the writer decides, well, why not have a slide which is attached to the climbing frame, so we'll have some sort of compromise. So we're maximising again on the play, the amount of play time that children can have in this playground. Final paragraph, we've got a summary, we've got a final evaluation, if you like. We've got a summary of all the decisions taken, showing that this writer has fulfilled the task which has been set in the instructions for the report. And very importantly, the writer shows that she's kept to the word count. The recommendation was between 500 and 600. It's really important to write the number of words you've used just to demonstrate that you've actually respected that word count that you were given. So there you have it. You've got critical writing. So we've talked about, for critical writing, analysis and evaluation being really important. Now, I've put some examples up here of language which is useful for critical writing. For example, talking about differences, cause, effect, comparison, similarities, making suggestions, advantages, disadvantages, concession. Concession means, yes, this is true, but this is also true, and this second thing is more important. That's concession, and that's very important when you're actually evaluating. And one last thing to say is that when you go into something in detail, you analyse something in detail, then you can reason, and your critical judgments are based on that reasoning. So your reasoning provides the evidence for your critical judgments. And in this task, because there were no reading sources, your reasoning for your judgments came from your background knowledge of play equipment. However, on your degree programme, your reasoning will not be based just on your background knowledge. It will be based on your interpretation of evidence that you've read or you've heard in academic sources. And later in this course, in Unit 4, we're going to look at a successful academic assignment which also displays very good ability to write critically, and you will see how this looks in when the writer has used sources other than simply background knowledge. So I hope you've enjoyed this unit and you've learned what critical writing is, and that you'll be able to apply this to the rest of the work we're doing in this course.